Before I ask the first question, to all the panelists, I would ask Maria to give a very brief introduction of our project. Maria.
Okay, can you hear me? Is it? Thank you very much, Christoph, and thank you also for inviting us here. And we are happy that we can start, kick off our project Design and Innovation here. What Christoph said, that it's a collaboration of institutions. So there are like two partner institutions of, I would say, like research and museum collection type. It's MAK in Vienna and Slovak Design Center in Bratislava. We have also a design museum, and we are doing a lot of activities in the field of design in Slovakia. Two partner institutions, which are educational institutions, are the Angewandte and Academy of Fine Arts and Design in Slovakia, in Bratislava. There are other partners institutions, so the aim is really to create a network of organizations, of groups, informal groups, who can talk about important topics of today, which all designers, people who are dealing with creative fields are thinking about, are working in these fields. They are talking about these notions like responsibility of designers or creative workers, or it's like, of course, ecology topics. I think there are topics which everybody from us is thinking about and is trying already to make changes. So when I mention change, this year's Vienna Biennale for Change will have a topic values, and it's connected with our project Design and Innovation. The final conference will be, for instance, part of the project, and there will be other public outputs. Make it shorter, we will create like one department of research and development in Slovakia, in Bratislava, and in MAK part, it will be innovation of MAK Design Lab. I think we can talk about it later. So.
Thank you. So we go right into the discussion. The first question will come as a shock to you, so be prepared. One of the world's most important and interesting design curators, Paola Antonelli. She's currently also head of the forthcoming Triennale di Milano, which will open at the end of February and will be devoted to the topic of broken nature. Design takes on human survival. There will be an Austrian national participation in that project, and I'm very happy that Maris Wirth will be the curator here of this Austrian national contribution. And Paola Antonelli recently said in New York, humanity will become extinct. We need to design an elegant ending. So my question is, what sort of innovation do we need for an elegant ending? But my wider question, Paola apparently meant this probably spread over the next 2 or 3 centuries and not over the next couple of years. But what kind of innovation in general do we need from a design perspective for a better future? So I would like you to comment on both Paola's vision and your own vision of what design can do for a better future.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me, or as a representation of the university and my research team and the students. To answer the question, for me, the innovation should take place at the Board of Disciplines, or at the No Man's Island, and there is an author, her name is Julie Thompson Klein, and She's actually very important for the National Science Foundation in the United States. So all important research work in the United States is related to interdisciplinary approach. And I believe that there are so many, there's so much things we produce, so it's a double or triple of knowledge in, for example, medicine. We cannot afford to know everything. And recently, for example, I was told from a physician, a medical doctor, that the problem is that, for example, young medical doctors, they know how to operate with robotics, but the problem appears right now that sometimes if you have to cut, for example, make a big cut into the body, they don't know how to do it anymore. And they have to call people from retirement to come back because they know how to do it and they're sure how to do it. So I believe if we talk about the future of design, I think we need an interdisciplinary approach, and if we are programming robots, I think we need the ethics to program them. So actually our designers and our ICT experts, they should engage they should get the knowledge of designers about human being, about ethics to approach this. And I think the innovation takes place at the no man's land between the disciplines. We have to cooperate, we have to learn team building, which actually designers and artists are not so fond of.
I agree, yeah. Would you like to comment on Paula too?
I don't like to talk about endings, and I don't believe in the ending of humans. I mean, I'm a little bit worried. I would not like, for example, to put a chip into my body like they do it in Sweden to use the public transport. But I'm actually also interested in technology. I do also a lot of projects with technology. I'm more maybe optimist. I think that actually the role of art and design was at the last industrial revolution. If you think about it, we had the art and craft movement against it, so always the artists had something to counterpart. But I also believe that this time it's very important that we take this position to say that people have to watch out and how to take care of design. But I'm a more optimist person. I think also the workers who were against the machines succeeded, and we will also not overcome the technologies. But we have to think about what about if there is a totally blackout. How do we deal with that? With knowledge? Do we think we get everything on the mobile phones or the computers? No, we don't. We need to have knowledge. We need to produce still knowledge, and therefore I'm more maybe optimistic than Paula.
Okay, fair enough. I would probably go directly now to Vlasta. Come back to you, Maria, later. Yeah.
Is it on? Yes. Okay, so I think that innovation is a lot about the details, what we can see in many startups world. But I think in order to see the future, in each innovation should be seen the bigger picture, and that's basically what we are also trying to do in our studio. That's how we started. So maybe I just explain a little bit what's on the slides. So this is the Professor Pavel Alexy from Slovak University of Technology, and he's chemist, and he has patented some specific mixture of bioplastic materials, which is the new generation of sustainable materials that are completely from renewable resources. And when we entered the research 6 or 7 years ago, I was still a student, and we were not really satisfied with the idea that they are only concentrating on developing this material for packaging industry, and for products that should be used as single-use products. So even though they didn't really believe that it's possible to go farther within several years, 5 or 10, we actually quite quickly started to experiment with this, even though without the knowledge of chemistry. And with kind of a basic approach, we started to improve this material, experiment with this, mix it and so on, until we got the first intermediates, and we did IVER from this. This was one of our proof of concept products. And once we realized that actually this material can be at least a part of the solution, we want to spread it out. So these samples, what you can see after these slides, are already part of our sample box of Nuatan, which is the name of our material. And as you said about the collaboration, we think, but also Miro from our studio, that this is the key for the future. But it's not that only designers are afraid of collaboration. It was very hard the first years to find our role within the collaboration with scientists. And to make them trust that the role of us can really be a big contribution in what they are doing. So I think that to design the elegant ending, it's very nice to say something like this, but I think it would be more important to design, even though partly, but practical solution to make the people who come after us enough good environment to survive, I would say.
Okay, so you have to do a little bit of a cleanup before, right? The next question I would address to you and to Thomas and Katharina. How much stuff do we need? I mean, designers are usually commissioned to design new stuff, yeah? We also need, but nowadays I think it's more important to design reduction. And maybe to design reduction is also a very important avenue of innovation for the future. So maybe you can briefly comment on that, and then we come to Thomas and Katharina Blaster. It's a difficult question.
Well, it's actually not that difficult, but it's one of the biggest contradictions in our project as well, because we are often being blamed for not designing the material as a plastic bottles or as something as a mass-produced product that can actually help to get rid of all possible plastics. But we actually think that to design the products with added value, where the consumer has some relationship to the material, can help to reduce actually the amount of products that we design. So in our work, it's almost everyday question how to communicate this. I think we are more or less sure what's our direction, but to make people believe that it's good and that it's not only the way how we want to earn more money, that's sometimes very tricky part.
I mean, you have to make a living. I mean, you know, it's the same conundrum as you have for startups. Usually they start out with a great idea to improve the world, and then they look for money, then they have venture capital and so on, and then they're being driven into a certain direction, you know, and they keep losing track of their original kind of spirit of improving the world, and it's really a difficult situation. Thomas and Katharina.
Well, I would call it a design dilemma. Since, in fact, the best thing designers can do are often, well, no, not the best things, but designers are really in love with objects. But at the same time, we manage to see the pros and cons. And I think the best benefit is that we can sometimes take innovation into the daily lives of people. And I would argue, yes, we have to reduce but probably it's not necessary that we have to reduce on design objects, but probably on landfill objects, because not everything there that we have in our hands is necessarily well designed. And if you really look at some products or projects that really can be repaired or updated or are kept in the family for certain reasons, it's not that we have to design less as, I think yes in quantity, but not necessarily in content, because I think design, the way designers approach problems and topics is something that shouldn't be limited, but should be actually brought more and more into daily life, but maybe not necessarily with objects.
Should I say something? Or?
You want me to continue, or should I? You want to say? Yeah.
No, I think what also is, yes, as a designer we are in a profession which we are kind of urged to, it's always about the new and the new, but I think as designers we can also make different choices, and we can also educate people a little bit to look at it from different point of views, and that to make people the right choices. And I think that's also what, like for example, a platform is used, or the museum or education is used for, to educate how to look at objects and then make the relevant and the right choices rather than just making choices.
But to what extent can you really influence companies that commission products from you? I mean, look at the Wiener Werkstätte. We have the Koloman Moser exhibition on you currently, and he was so fed up with Wiener Werkstätte in the end because he felt, well, these clients, I want to produce applied art, yeah. But these clients ask me things I don't want to do, and he kind of became more and more frustrated with this situation, having on the one hand this ambition to produce applied art, and the word art is very important in this context, yeah? And on the other hand, living in a reality where you're really dependent on clients. And I think I could imagine it's very difficult. How do you cope with it?
One can see a lot of designers starting their own productions on a small scale in order to react to what they think would be the next step. I guess a lot of us are hoping that then probably companies will take it over, or will understand that probably the small labels that pop up have some value, and that should be continued and brought on the market, because a lot of young designers especially don't necessarily want to design something for a company just to be mass produced somewhere by someone, not knowing what will happen in the end with the object. So I think there's a shift in education and in generations coming along that try to do it differently. I agree as well that companies are not reacting enough, because there are enough other models still working, and as long as the consumers don't react to the needs of the planet and society, the companies won't react. So it's always a vicious circle where it's not necessarily just the company or just the designer or just the consumer. It's basically it needs a conversation between all three in order to move into the right direction.
I couldn't agree more. That's really the problem. Talking about the next step, Maria, what is your view? What has to be the next step at the interface of design and innovation? What is your vision for the Slovak Design Center in this regard?
I think it's really important to exchange information. It's I don't know, like we really are living in interconnected world where we share many information. If it's a really, I don't know, useless pieces of memes, or if it's I don't know, the latest lectures and the latest philosophies. So I think we really should use this possibility that we are talking about. We spend so much energy, so much sources to be connected, and I think there is no way that now we would cut all this and go back in the past. So let's use this for exchanging information and informing each other about the ways of possible change, of possible steps which we can do. So for me, this is just a part of the beginning that we started to talk about the topics.
So the question is also, how do we deal with the thrill of the new? You know, the fascination with the new. Ruth.
I wanted to add something. I believe that, for example, Viktor Papanek, well, actually, first of all, Konstantin Grcic once, he quoted this topic of that we don't need new stuff because some tools still work from our grandparents, yes, so we should not make a new toaster just with special visual new icons. And I believe still that Viktor Papanek is very right, that there are so many things still to be designed. Not only to look at, I think it's very awesome, your work with in your lab, I really admire it. And I think there's so many things we still have to look at. So look at the six things Papanek wanted us to design upon. And he actually said, as I understood it, that only 10% of a designer's living should be investigated in that items, yes? So because you have to make a living on something, of course, but at least each of us should investigate a little bit in these things. So for example, in medical things or in education or in people who nobody cares of. So we have something of this global sustainability goals we already have expressed by Viktor Papanek, and I think we should not forget that. And for me, this is still very innovative because we try to forget and always just look at the new things and not look at what is still to do.
Papanek was definitely one of the most important ones, the most intelligent ones among designers, that's for sure. But maybe you could also comment on the question of, it was touched on before, things are all connected to each other, you know, developments, etc. So in order to deal with them, you need a holistic view. Is a university like the Angewandte in a position to teach or to kind of, how should I say, to program even a holistic view into the students?
It's a good question and difficult question because I think we try quite a lot to approach design from very different perspectives. And I think this is very important, and I also think the development of design is very crucial. So there was a need for critical design. We still discuss again, what is universal design? If we do universal design, if we talk about participatory design, what is the quality of the aesthetics? So we try to approach design from very different viewpoints. If all students try to get these perspectives, I cannot guarantee.
What you would be, sorry, I ask another question. What would be on your wish list if you get additional money? What would you do with it in terms of developing this holistic approach as a key tool for the curriculum?
Well, I'm working since quite a few years on I call it applied design thinking, because design thinking is not just about thinking, but also about doing. And for me, this is always like having an idea, putting the idea with an interdisciplinary team together, and trying to solve this and also disseminate it. For example, when I'm doing this, I try to go with the students to make an exhibition at the end, to go to a conference. So this is always an objective, and then you have different viewpoints. You learn a lot about professionalism, and I think this is an interesting approach because it works interdisciplinary. Also, people from other universities took part in the past. And I believe in this form because it's overall, it's not separated. It's not like somebody's teaching design, and the other one is teaching about theory of design, but it's more this holistic approach, going back and trying to combine it and live from the cooperation of a team.
Let's talk a little bit about the ecological component. Yeah, and I would ask Vlasta, what is your approach? I mean, you're dealing with topics that have an enormous ecological dimension. So how do we approach this? How can designers also be role models in promoting this agenda?
So I think that we are taking the ecology from different approach, from various approaches, let's say. We are trying to be radical in a way. We are trying to not do many compromises when it comes to ecological impact of our material. But what we are also trying to do is to make sure that what we are using is transparent, so we can tell everybody who will use our material or our products that we know where the material is coming from, how they should deal with it. So it's not only about the start of the product in form of material research, but it's also about the depth of the product. So one of the projects what we are now doing is designing a small version of an industrial composter, because maybe some of you might know that most of the bioplastic that are on the market can be only composted in an industrial compost, and infrastructure for this almost doesn't exist in the cities. So we are trying to do to be mediators, basically, between the research, the actual research, material research, the consumer, but also for producer of products, because sometimes it's the hardest thing is to help clients or companies to rethink their whole product. So it can be also designed differently, and maybe then it's not necessary to use a new material, but it can make more impact. And also one of the crucial things is to make the ecological products and the new materials beautiful and sexy.
But I like the term, especially since we have a beauty exhibition right now.
Yes.
So please elaborate on it.
No, because the truth is that also when we started, we were surprised that there are so many ecological materials on the market, but they are still not used in the products. And when we did the research, most of the companies and also the consumers said us, yeah, we would like to buy it, but it just looks as a shit. It looks brown or green and all the same. So, of course, like sometimes it has a sense, but on the other hand, many companies started to use these colors as kind of greenwashing, even though the material doesn't have to be necessarily ecological. But when it's green or brown, it helps you think that it could go to compost, let's say.
Well, brown is not the most popular color in this exhibition, as you probably have noticed. Let's Thomas and Katharina, and in this case Thomas, yeah? Can you talk a little bit about or elaborate a little bit on your design philosophy as I mentioned at the interface of craft and technology. You're interested in technology, you deal with it, but you're also interested in craft. So what is your general philosophy, also kind of against the notion of innovation, which is an overused word these days? We nevertheless have to deal with it because our world is governed by ambitions of disruptive innovation everywhere, not always to the best of our society. So what would be your take on that?
I think first, one last, because it's always something which also stuck in our head once a mentor told us at university. You can have
Only
such a
close
great
the micro.
you can have such a great concept, but if it looks crap, no one is interested in. And this is something we always kind of burnt in our head, that it's very important that no matter how the concept is, it also needs to be attractive, which I think is, I would say, part of the philosophy. As you said, we try that our project have like several layers. The one is kind of the visual layer about the project, and the other one is more the conceptual layer, and then more the message we would like to communicate. And we try, I think, also with the mix of craft and technology, that technology should never be on the forehand of the project. It should not be the most important thing. For us, it's just the technology is a facilitator to reach emotion in the visitor, or to tackle a project and to make this project happen, or to make our vision, what we would like to achieve or what we would like to show, we would like to make it happen, but we always try to hide it, because it's not, for us, this is not the most important part. Because as soon as the technology is like on the, it's more important than kind of the emotional level. You just think how it's working, but not what you feel. And I think to kind of turn it over is for us important when we use technology in our project.
So it's not new technology for the sake of new technology.
No, not really. And
Katharina?
no.
I think we try to combine. Basically, we try to combine the robots and the cutting in one go, like by using our hands and the technology that we can use, but without losing the emotional value that you can bring into design objects or into objects of everyday life. And technology offers a lot, but once you just do it for technology's sake, you lose this emotional value that you need in order to get it into people and into people's minds, and then to really trigger a reaction. And I think that's what we really try to by combining the craft, technology, and the concept in our work.
You want to add something?
Yes, I wanted to add something. I believe that actually designers play a crucial role in our times concerning innovation. For example, because you mentioned this crafting and designing things, I believe, for example, if you think about using robots in elderly care, I believe that if you're, I don't want to be superstitious about other disciplines, and I think all disciplines have a lot of very interesting approaches. But I believe that, for example, a designer would think about the temperature of a robot hand in doing care for elderly people or for us. I think this is a totally different approach, and I think this is needed. And I think we have to intervene in that place, and we have to be respected in that area, because I think we are able to show these different perspectives. And if people see that, I think this is a crucial chance for our society and also responsibility in society. And I think this has to be regarded well.
It's a key point. I think we have brilliant technologies, but we have to make brilliant use of these technologies, right? That's really very important. Talking about new technologies, Maria, now my question, how can you kind of promote a constant dialogue, maybe even cooperation between the startup world or worlds and designers? How would it work in Bratislava? What can your institution do?
Okay, startups, it's really like a special topic. In Slovakia, it's still this boom of startups, you know? And we have even like the greatest promoter, our president is really fond of startups, and he is promoting it everywhere. And we have startup awards where, you know, it's these typical presentations when the teams who have startups are presenting their project, and yeah, they are awarded and so on. I think sometimes I feel that these are like two isolated groups. Like when I'm looking at the projects which are in Slovakia presented as like startup ideas or startup projects, it sometimes lack exactly this like holistic approach that we spoke about technology for technology case, and sometimes it looks like this, that it's kind of a game that, okay, who will create like new gadget which will be better, which will be like something what is not our aim. So yeah, like, but recently, like in last 1 to 2 years, I started to see change also in this, that in these presentations there is also always kind of, I would say, responsibility element that already people are realizing and they are adding it there. So it's kind of, maybe it's fashion, but you know, fake it till you make it, and people are putting there, okay, like our project is also ecological because of this, is taking care about social issues and so on. So this responsibility element is kind of hope in this, that I hope that we will really get working these fields, and it will soon not be only technologies for technologies.
We have to actively push the agenda, you know, I think. Vlasta.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to this that we were at the beginning also something between startup and design studio, and we found it very hard to be in that world when all the startups are going very linear, and it's only about a certain period of time when the innovation must work, and if it doesn't, then it's lost, and it's not interesting for investors or in general for the startup scene. And I think that it would be interesting to have something in between, where the project that could have a long-term impact could be also supported within the investors' fields, and doesn't have to exit their companies within 2 years when the research is still not done, I would say.
Maybe I would also have another suggestion for innovation. Internationally, I can observe that there is a lot of design management. So there are a lot of young people investigating in how to bring designers' ideas into companies. So they make their PhDs about that. And this is a little bit, for me, missing in Austria. I remember many years ago, I had the honor to do something, the first design management course at Herrnstein Management Institute. I was still at the end of my studies, but I think this is still somehow missing in Austria, because like bringing your ideas into the company, that you know that your research works, yes, that your innovative ideas really get a sustainable foundation. I think this is something missing in Austria. I would also think that this could be very interesting.
I agree, but it's more complicated than you would think. You know, I think 2 decades ago, or even longer, this concept of the design ladder was developed in Scandinavia, and the highest level of that ladder is strategic design. And Hartmut Esslinger, for instance, would also preach that really the designer have to work next to the CEO of a company. That's the ideal, but in practice, it's very rare, I would say, because only when you can influence the CEO, you really have an impact on where a specific company is going, you know. But I would say that we need more of that, in that sense that old concept is not old-fashioned, but it has to be made operational. It has to be made effective, right? And I also very much liked your points. You know, I have this romantic notion of a dialogue between what I call the new design avant-garde, and I'm not shy of talking of a new avant-garde, and you're all part of it, on the one hand, and a new entrepreneurial avant-garde on the other hand. Yes, there are entrepreneurs who really have ambitious goals to improve the world, to make a valuable contribution, valuable not only in sense of money, but also in sense of virtue, you know. I think we need both sides. We need the drive of startups, the scaling of startups, but we need the input by designers. But I also agree with your notion, Vlasta, that we need something in between. You could call it slow startups, because startup is about innovation and rapid growth, rapid scaling within a couple of years or even faster, whereas you need innovation also, let's say, for more regional, even local contexts, where you don't have that sort of scaling, you know? And this is something we really have to also encourage. So before, I have a last round now, one question to all of you, and then we open up for a few questions for the audience. And the question is a really difficult one, or easy one. You decide. The Vienna Biennale is about virtues, you know? It's called Brave New Virtues, Shaping Our Digital World. Werte in German. So what are your top 3 virtues, brave new virtues, to shape our digital world? And I would ask you to note them down, because we need a lot of impact from your answers, also with regard to our preparations. Who wants to start?
It's not personal, it's like the general, like the virtues
General,
for...
it's against this context of design and innovation.
Okay.
We need design, we need innovation to kind of change the world. We are in a certain predicament. We have created lots of problems in spite of the high quality of life that we all have. But in terms of ecology, social inequality, etc., our legacy is not really brilliant, to put it mildly. So the question is, what are the brave new virtues we need for the future? What are your top 3 virtues?
Probably I would start, because I would like to add to the last comment of innovation, and probably that startups try always to go innovative. And I agree with Vlasta that probably it needs to be sometimes not innovation for the sake of trying to achieve the innovation, but sometimes we need room. And now my first word would come in to play and to be playful, because just when you can play freely, innovation can happen. And then I would vote for fantasy, because fantasy doesn't necessarily need to have a goal, but by implementing it into our daily lives, we actually move on. And then I can't pick the third one, but I actually wanted to add the 2 for the, like, it went very well with the previous conversation. Maybe you pick the third one for us.
Thanks. I don't know. I think, for example, one is transparency, but I think not just the transparency in like a very political manner, but also where are things coming from, that we have more knowledge about the things. And the other one I would pick is reality, but I think reality more because when we also talk about digitalization and technology and innovation, it's a lot about like digital. It's not, everything is about like data and intangible things, but in the end, all those intangible data need resources, need reality. They're based on reality in a way, even though they just exist floating around.
So don't lose track of reality.
Yes, I think that's what I would say, and base it on. And I think the last one, empathy, but not just empathy between humans, but also empathy to objects or to species, to natural surrounding. I think those were now 3.
Can we repeat? Can we repeat words? No? Yes, maybe. Okay, my first would be on the borderline between new technology. The first virtue would be human rights. The second would be empathy. And the third would be curiosity. too short?
Okay. I have ability to learn from the past. I think this could be really useful. That if we won't repeat mistakes from the past, then open-mindedness. I know it sounds simple, but this is really important, I think. And then I don't know if it's virtue or whatever. It's a kind of ability to sacrifice. Either it is comfort or maybe some personal advantages, but yeah, like maybe it sounds serious, but yeah, ability to sacrifice.
So for me, it's also transparency, but also not towards the others, but also towards ourselves and everything basically what we are doing, because there are so many lies everywhere around us that this is not leading anywhere. And then there will be taking an action. Just when we think that there must be change something, we have to start now. And doesn't matter if it's a big or small step, but it has to be seen that everybody is trying.
Okay. Thank you. So we have, I would add only one value from my side. We haven't exhausted the list, but a value I'm particularly fond of is that we have to be resonant human beings. Thomas, you touched on it when you said empathy towards objects also, but it's also this resonance that we should feel when talking to each other, when dealing with each other, but also when dealing with objects, with buildings, with the material world, etc., etc. I even have resonance with my smartphone. Apologies. Okay, so there's plenty of food for questions. We can take a couple of questions. Who wants to start? You have another 10 minutes or so. Don't be shy. When I moderated panels in the US, there were always immediately 20 questions. No? Okay. One? No? Ah, okay. That's... Yes? Go ahead. There is a micro. You borrow one, not mine. You get mine if you want.
I have a question to you, because you said in the beginning that you don't want to go back. But what would you say is a step back? Because I think that sometimes, because we are always talking about progress and going further, but not always going further means, or it doesn't mean that when we go a step back, this couldn't be a progress sometimes, because sometimes we are more intelligent when we did something wrong, for example, and we learn from it, and then we have to go back. So what would you say? Or what is a step back for you, for example?
Oh, yeah, thank you. It's but then also I said this ability to learn from the past, of course, like this step back, if it means that, okay, let's not repeat some mistake, let's come somewhere to some point from which we can repair it is great, but like we really cannot go to the past. It's only in science fiction that we can travel to past and, okay, now we draw the line and we start again. It's not possible, and we need really to be realistic and realize this, that from now we can go only on to the future, and we have to work with the situation we have now here. And you can, yeah, maybe we need to realize that really some changes are irreversible, that we cannot go to the point where it was okay and start from there. So this was maybe the meaning I had on mind. But you are right that we should be able to say, okay, this is not a good direction and let's change it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other replies? Any other questions? If not, I would maybe finish here with this notion of progress. You know, One of the projects I really liked in the last couple of years, actually it was 15 years ago, was an exhibition by Tino Segal at the Guggenheim. And if you know the Guggenheim, it has this rotunda and you walk up or down, whichever direction. I always walk up. And at each turn, a different person would come to you and ask a question. And the question I most vividly remember, I think it was asked by a sort of 12-year-old, but I may be wrong, was the question, what is progress? And then you had 150 meters to discuss with that 12-year-old the notion, what is progress? And every visitor kind of was asked by lots of, then other questions were asked by elderly people or by people in between. But this question of what is progress is a very, very important question, which we should ask ourselves every day. And this is probably also a nice conclusion to this panel on design and innovation. Thank you to all of you for participating. Thank you to you for coming and listening and asking one question only. Next time, please, more questions. And please stay tuned to the preparations of the Vienna Biennale and of this project, Design and Innovation. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.